So we've pulled a sample from our compost tea that's been brewing for 24 hours, and I'm going to go ahead and show you what we're seeing on the microscope here by looking at the display on the laptop. And what you're seeing here is just an organic mass. This is, by the way, I'm running 20x eyepieces in a 10x lens. But what I wanted to show you in particular is like these small lines here, strands. If you notice, they're uniform in color. They're actually clear for the most part. I'm focusing in and out. And if you look at them, you'll actually see that they have little dividers every so often. And those are called septa. So they're uniform in diameter more or less, uniform in color more or less, and they have the septa in them. So that's indicative of fungal hyphae. So that's the roots of mold. And it's really hard to actually get that to happen in compost tea. Like I've mentioned before, we've tried various things, grinding up oats and lots of different kinds of additives. For the most part, what we've been successful at getting fungal hyphae in there is our fish oil actually we bought it in a 55-gallon drum, and it's been sitting now for some of it through the winter, and it's developed mold on the surface and so on, and that aged fish oil seems to be really good at promoting mold growth. Now, additionally, if you look you'll see there's little protozoa here bumbling around. This slide's actually been sitting here for a little bit, so they're not as many, but I'll move it in a second, or maybe I can just move it right now. By the way, if you wondered about this mass up here, that's actually a mold spore, I believe, an ascospore, something like that. So I'll try and move around a bit here on this mass. You know, what you won't see on mold spores is it won't go along and then all of a sudden, a lot of times on organic matter, you have a piece of fibrous material, and it'll look like it's fungal hyphae, mold roots, but actually it's not, because at the end it'll sort of fray out, and fungal hyphae just break off. They don't fray like that. So I'm just kind of scanning around here a little bit. I wanted to show you all this material is actually loaded up with flagellates, but we're not seeing them now because it took a little while for us to get going. By the way, these longer strands here, like here and here and here, those are actually bacteria chains. I think they call them ascospores or something like that. Anyway, it's not fungal hyphae, it's actually bacteria. And you'll see that a lot of times as when the brew first starts up, and then later on it'll turn more and more into flagellates. If you look here, I'm just looking at this strand here, and it is fairly uniform in thickness. You can have other material stuck onto the fungal hyphae. I believe that is a fungal hyphae. And you see these little blobs here sort of spinning around. Those are actually flagellates. And they're at various depths, so if I focus in and out, you can see at one point one will come into focus, and at another point another come into focus. So even with that thin layer, you still get quite a bit of depth that you're dealing with when you're using the microscope. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I set this up, and I've been told that I should use a new slide. Normally I just wipe the slide off with a rag and reuse it because we just want a rough idea of what's going on in there, but I'll get myself a new slide and a new cover slip. And by the way, when you're first learning your microscope, you really should take the time and watch a video online on how to set it up. For example, you have your aperture here, which controls the light. It opens and closes like this. And then you have your light source. And one of the things you want to do is drop your aperture out, take it off your stage. And then you put a piece of paper over your light source that covers half of your light source. And then you can look through your microscope and you adjust your stage up and down right here with this dial. Of course, that'll be different on every microscope on where that adjustment is. Oh, look who came to visit. Did you want to help? Are you helping? I don't think it's good if you drink the compost tea while we're trying to do this. So, yeah, you adjust the stage up and down until you get a clear line between at the edge of the paper showing up as you're looking through the eyepieces. And then, as I mentioned in a previous video, as you're adjusting it, you always want to reduce your light. She's actually drinking that tea. I don't know why she would do that. That's not helping. You're not helping. Yeah, you think you are, but you're not. I'm going to put you down. Yep, here we go. There we go. Okay. So, learn your microscope, get it set up properly, and then when you're adjusting your light, you always want to choke down your light as much as you possibly can, because otherwise you're not going to see these small microorganisms. Actually, you want to choke down your aperture as much as possible, because that helps give you better depth perception, and also just reduce the light overall as much as possible too. So you play around, you turn up your light enough so that you can choke it down quite a bit with your aperture, and then overall not have all that much light. And that's going to really help you see the microorganisms. So I'm just putting a drop on the slide, maybe a little more than a drop. And then I'm going to take my cover slip and set it in at a glancing angle, and then go ahead and release it. And I tap it down a little bit, and then I'll take like a tissue or something like that if I have a little extra moisture at the edges, and just blot up that extra. If you have too much moisture underneath your slide, liquid underneath your slide, everything's going to sort of like look as if it's in a river flowing along. So you want to get rid of that excess. Now, if we come over here and take a look, so I have to actually readjust every time I change the lens, but one of the things that you want to be careful of is when you're first using your microscope is it's easy to focus on the top of set your focus on the top of the cover slip, or actually the bottom of the microscope slide. And you'll think that you're actually looking at material because, of course, there's always, at higher magnifications, there's irregularities and scratches and so on that glass. And you'll think, well, there's nothing happening, but actually you're not focused at the right depth. So make sure you play around with that. And once you kind of know what you're looking for, then it'll be easy to tell. Like here I can see this is, a blob of organic matter, and I'm going to adjust my... But, if I kept focusing out this way, I can actually see here I'm looking at the top of the cover slip, and I must have grabbed the wrong cover slip because that one's terribly dirty. Boy, that's just so bad, I'm going to have to redo it. Sorry, I got distracted by the kitten. So this is what I normally do, is I just wipe it off and wipe this one off. And that's good enough. Too much there. I like to tap it down just with the edge of my fingernail so I'm not actually smearing the slide, the cover slip. And normally I would have a piece of tissue, but got this paper towel, which isn't nearly as absorbent. But that's going to be good enough. Let's put this back on the stage. And then, well, it's somewhat cleaner, but if you look, you can still see I have a lot of little dots on my cover slip. So I'm going to actually focus at the right depth here, where that organic matter is. And this is a 4x lens that I'm using. But if you just sort of look at it in general, and hopefully it'll show up on the video, but all of these little dots here sort of bouncing around everywhere, those are all flagellates, and those are very good protozoa to have in your mix. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to a 10x lens, and I'm going to have to increase my light slightly. Maybe too much, just want just enough, and then I got to, like I said, refocus every time I switch lenses. But now you can see those flagellates bumbling around in there. Some of them spin in circles, sometimes they move with purpose, but still they bumble some. And then, like I said, these longer pieces here, like this one, that's a bacterial chain. That is not a mold spore, or a fungal hyphae, excuse me. And I'm going to choke my light down just a little bit, because that's always helpful. But there's a lot of activity, a lot of flagellates in there. So let me try and scan around a little bit. There's another mass of organic material. Again, if I play around with the depth of view, you know, what depth I'm focusing at, like this little guy swimming around there, that might be a tiny nematode. I'm not sure what that was. Usually nematodes are huge in comparison. They look like worms swimming along, and they're much, much bigger than that typically. So, you know, I run into different microorganisms that I don't really know what they are, but, you know, I can recognize the flagellates and ciliates. We caught one of those on a previous video. Ciliates, I don't, you know, by the time you start getting a lot of ciliates, your brew has gone too long. It is starting to become oxygen deprived. So again, these longer pieces here, these are, I believe they're, yeah, I'd have to look it up. It's something like ascospores or something to that effect. Oh, actinomyces, there it is. It just came to me. So, we're seeing a lot of actinomyces. We're seeing organic matter, blobs of organic matter, and just lots and lots of flagellates. So, this brew could go a little bit longer, probably because I'm seeing those longer bacterial chains in there still. But I think we're going to probably go ahead and spray it. It's getting later in the day, and I don't think I want this to go overnight. I think we're going to go too far, and we're just going to start to get lots and lots of ciliates, and we're going to lose our flagellates. So here, I'm looking to the left here to try and discern if that's a fungal hyphae or what I think that is. I'm going to try and choke the light down just a little bit to see if that'll help. I do not think that's organic matter for a couple reasons. One is as focus in and out, it looks like it's actually tapering down in size. It also is really wavy on this end, which you typically don't see with fungal hyphae. And I'm not really picking up on any septa, those dividers that I talked about previously. So I don't think that it's a fungal hyphae. It's just a chunk of maybe a leaf or something like that. Here we have a lot of flagellates swimming around. And you know what? When they go quickly, you get this stretched out effect, and I'm not sure if that has to do with the video recording or what that is, video display or what, but I have zoomed in on those from time to time to try and figure out if those were something other than flagellates, and every time I've done that, I've came back with the conclusion that they are flagellates. They're just, when they move more quickly, they have this sort of stretched out effect, and they don't look round like they typically are, sort of bumbling around. So, yeah, we'll call that good enough for this one. There's a mold spore. And again, if you look up here on the top of this mass, you see, you say to yourself, well, maybe that's a fungal hyphae, but it's not. That's that actinomyces. That's just a bacterial chain. You can get a lot of those, like I said initially. And because I'm seeing a lot of them, I would think this brew could probably go a little bit longer, because they tend to go away as the brew reaches its peak. And we have more of those in there just simply because we're using blackstrap molasses and fish oil from last year, which is not necessarily a problem, but it's fermented, and like I said, the fish oil does tend to get a little bit of mold in it. But if you hit it with a lot of oxygen like we are, ultimately what's going to happen is the aerobic, the oxygen-loving microbes are going to win out, and we're seeing that in terms of this bloom of the flagellate. So yeah, I had hoped to have a ciliate swim by or a nematode, but I guess we're not going to see it in this video. We'll do another one on the next brew, and maybe let it go a little bit longer so that I can show you some of those, at least the ciliates anyway.